You've been told your whole life that strength is shown through words, that confidence means speaking up, explaining yourself, proving your point. But what if I told you the opposite is true? That the most devastating weapon in human interaction is not what you say, but what you refuse to say. Silence, when wielded with intent, is the blade that cuts deeper than any argument. And it terrifies those who live on emotional manipulation. Picture this. She throws out a loaded question, one designed to pull you into her frame. Do you even care about us? The average man responds immediately, scrambling to justify, to reassure, to explain. But in that frantic performance, he's already lost. The more he speaks, the more ammunition he hands over. Every word becomes material for reinterpretation, escalation, and control. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine you say nothing. No excuses, no defensive energy, no frantic clarifications. Just silence. In that silence, the game changes. Suddenly, she is the one exposed. Silence is feared because it cannot be manipulated. Words can be twisted. Explanations can be reframed. Defenses can be used against you. But silence? Silence leaves nothing to grab onto. It reflects her tactics back at her, forcing her to confront the emptiness of her own maneuver. That's why silence is not weakness, it's power. It destabilizes the entire psychological economy of conflict by refusing to provide the raw material it needs to survive. Think about the moments when silence unnerved you. An unanswered message, a pause that stretched too long, a person who didn't react the way you expected. Those moments lived in your head, didn't they? You replayed them, you filled in the gaps, you created stories out of absence. That's the exact mechanism at play. Silence is not nothing. It is a mirror that makes the other side project their fears, their insecurities, their hunger for control. And here's the forbidden truth. Silence is the one response women cannot fully weaponize. They can manipulate your anger, twist your apologies, inflate your defensiveness, but they cannot twist nothing. That's why silence is the weapon they fear. It shifts the burden back onto them, forcing them to reveal their hand. In silence, every manipulation attempt hits a wall and bounces back. The modern man has been trained to over-communicate, to confess, to narrate every feeling, as if constant verbal proof equals intimacy. But real power doesn't explain itself. Real power doesn't scramble to be understood. Real power waits, watches, and allows the silence to work as pressure. Because silence is pressure, it amplifies insecurity. It forces truth to leak out. It makes games collapse under their own weight. Today, we will break down the hidden psychology of silence, why saying nothing often gains you everything, how the brain reacts when it cannot extract feedback, and why women, masters of verbal and emotional sparring, find silence to be the weapon that terrifies them most. Because in the end, the man who controls his words controls the battlefield, and the man who controls his silence already owns it. To understand why silence terrifies, you have to look beneath culture, beneath conversation, beneath the surface of everyday interaction. You must look at the machinery of human psychology itself. Because silence isn't just an absence of sound. It's a disruption of a system that has been running for millennia. From an evolutionary perspective, women have always been more verbally dominant. Studies in evolutionary psychology show that female coalitions were built on communication, gossip, social bonding, and emotional decoding. Words were currency, and the ability to read subtle cues meant survival within the tribe. Men, on the other hand, specialized in silence, tracking prey, moving stealthily, conserving words for necessity. The two systems coexisted, but they were asymmetrical. Women's strategies leaned on expression, men's leaned on restraint. Fast forward to the modern world, and this asymmetry is amplified. Modern dating culture and relationship norms reward men who explain themselves, confess feelings, and constantly provide verbal proof of commitment. Meanwhile, women, whether consciously or instinctively, leverage this expectation. They know that by asking, "What are you thinking?" they pull you into a frame where words can be used as weapons. Every answer is fuel, every clarification is raw material, and the more you give, the less control you keep. Neuroscience adds another layer. The human brain is addicted to feedback loops. When we act, we expect a response. When we send a message, we crave a reply. Silence interrupts that loop. It triggers the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear and uncertainty. Without feedback, the brain spirals, generating stories, assumptions, and paranoia. That's why an unanswered text feels worse than an angry one. Anger gives you data. Silence gives you nothing but your own mind turned against itself. Social psychology calls this the information gap. Humans hate gaps in understanding, and we will go to great lengths to fill them. Silence creates the largest gap of all. It denies the other person the data they need to control the interaction. Instead of you being predictable, they are forced to confront unpredictability. That unpredictability is threatening, because whoever controls predictability controls the frame. But here's where the cultural coding makes it even sharper. Men are taught that silence equals weakness. Speak up. Say what you feel. Explain yourself. This programming trains you to treat words as the only path to strength. Yet, historically, silence has been the marker of authority. Kings didn't argue with peasants. Generals didn't explain their every move to soldiers. Power was measured by restraint, not by constant justification. And so silence operates as both biological disruption and cultural violation. Biologically, it starves the manipulation machinery of the feedback it needs to function. Culturally, it subverts the narrative that men must over-communicate to prove their worth. That's why women fear silence in ways they rarely admit, because it denies them the very medium, words, through which they usually operate. Think of it clinically. Words are levers. They move emotions, they redirect behavior, they escalate conflicts. Silence removes the levers entirely. No matter how skilled someone is at pulling strings, they cannot pull what isn't there. That absence flips the dynamic. The manipulator, starved of feedback, becomes the one who is manipulated by their own projections, their own fears, their own need for control. This is why silence is not passive. It is active disruption. It hijacks biology, fractures culture, and exposes manipulation for what it is, a system dependent on your words to survive. Once you stop feeding it, the system begins to collapse, and that collapse is where your power begins. Now let's expose the hidden machinery, the 5 silent mechanisms that make saying nothing one of the most feared and misunderstood forms of power. 1. The mirror effect. Silence forces projection. When you don't respond, the other person fills the void with their own fears, doubts, and insecurities. Instead of you defending yourself, they argue with their own imagination. Example, she texts you, "Do you still care about me?" You say nothing. Within hours, her mind runs scenarios. He must be losing interest. Maybe he found someone else. Your silence did the work of 10 arguments without you lifting a finger. 2. The control reversal manipulation thrives on feedback. Every word you speak provides data to be twisted. Silence starves the system, flipping the dynamic. Suddenly, the manipulator becomes the one chasing clarity, not you. Example, in an argument, she raises her voice, waiting for you to defend yourself. You remain quiet. The escalation collapses because she has nothing to latch onto. Control has shifted without you saying a word. 3. The uncertainty amplifier. The human brain hates gaps. When no answer comes, the brain works overtime to create one. This uncertainty is far more destabilizing than any verbal attack. It forces the other person into psychological overdrive while you conserve energy. Example: she expects a quick reply to a provocative comment. Instead, silence stretches. Minutes feel like hours, and her certainty erodes. The longer the pause, the more she destabilizes herself. 4. The scarcity trigger. Attention is a currency. Words are proof of investment. When you go silent, your words suddenly gain value. Each withheld response increases their craving for the next one. Your silence makes you scarce, and scarcity always raises perceived worth. Example: instead of responding to every small jab, you withhold. Days later, when you finally speak, your words carry 10 times the weight because they've been starved of them. 5. The frame protector. Every argument is a battle for the frame whose perspective dominates. The moment you speak defensively, you've already entered their frame. Silence refuses the entry. It leaves you unframed, untouchable, operating from your own center. Example: she accuses you, "You never care about what I need." Any reply drags you into her narrative. Silence rejects the invitation. The accusation hangs in the air, unvalidated, and the frame collapses under its own weight. These 5 mechanisms don't operate separately, they layer together. Silence mirrors back insecurity, reverses control, amplifies uncertainty, creates scarcity, and protects your frame, all while requiring no energy from you. That's why silence isn't passive. It's active strategy. It's not avoidance. It's offense by non-participation. And here lies the paradox. The less you say, the more power you hold. The weapon isn't in the words you craft. It's in the words you withhold. Understanding the mechanics of silence isn't enough. You need protocols, practical rules that turn silence from an accident into a weapon. Here are the 5 survival rules, each mapped directly to the mechanisms we've just uncovered. Survival Rule 1. Weaponize the mirror. Practical tactic. When faced with loaded questions or emotional traps, resist the urge to explain. Instead, allow silence to force projection. Count to 10 internally before even considering a reply. If the tension grows, hold it. The longer you resist, the more their insecurities surface. Your silence becomes a mirror, showing them what they fear most, without you having to say a single word. Survival Rule 2. Refuse to feed the machine. Practical tactic. Manipulation requires data. Treat every provocation as a baited hook. Before you respond, ask, "Am I giving material that can be twisted?" If the answer is yes, say nothing. Walk away, breathe, or maintain eye contact without words. The absence of input dismantles the control reversal. You remain the stable center while the other side struggles with the lack of feedback. Survival Rule 3. Master the uncertainty gap. Practical tactic. Use silence strategically in digital communication. When messages are designed to provoke, delay your response, not with passive aggression, but with intentional discipline. Hours of silence trigger the uncertainty amplifier, forcing them into their own spirals. When you finally respond, keep it concise and neutral, denying them the emotional explosion they expected. Uncertainty now works in your favor. Survival Rule 4. Create scarcity by choice. Practical tactic. Stop rewarding every demand with immediate words. Set a personal rule. Your voice and attention are limited resources, reserved for when they serve you. This doesn't mean ignoring everything. It means rationing communication so your words maintain weight. Speak when you choose, not when pressured. Over time, this reframes your silence as strength and your words as valuable currency. Survival Rule 5. Guard your frame with silence. Practical tactic. In arguments, never defend accusations framed to trap you. Silence is your firewall. When told, you always, or you never, do not explain. Do not counterattack. Let the accusation hang unsupported. Silence strips the frame of validation and forces the other person to confront its weakness. Your refusal to engage is not withdrawal. It is a refusal to be redefined by someone else's narrative. Stack these rules together, and silence transforms from an accident into an arsenal. You stop being reactive. You stop bleeding power through constant words. Instead, you turn absence into presence, quiet into pressure, restraint into dominance. But understand this: discipline is required. Silence is not easy. It feels unnatural at first because you've been conditioned to explain, to reassure, to prove. That conditioning will scream at you to fill the void. But every time you resist, you grow stronger. Every withheld word is a repetition in the psychological gym, building your capacity to hold frame while others collapse under their own noise. And once mastered, silence no longer feels like doing nothing. It feels like conducting a symphony where the pause is more powerful than the note. It is not passive avoidance. It is active command. It is the weapon most feared because it cannot be intercepted, cannot be twisted, cannot be stolen. Silence belongs entirely to you, and that is why it terrifies. Silence is not emptiness. It is a presence so heavy that it bends the air around it. It is the pause between thunder and lightning, the weight of the unknown, the echo of a truth too dangerous to be spoken. Men have been told that words are their weapons, but the forbidden reality is this: silence cuts deeper than speech ever could. Think about the battlefield of relationships. One man raises his voice, the other defends himself. Both are bleeding power with every word they spill, and then there is the man who says nothing. His silence becomes the terrain itself, unmovable, immovable, forcing others to stumble around him. That is why silence is feared. It cannot be fought with more words. It cannot be disarmed. Here is the paradox: silence feels like nothing to you, but to others it feels like everything. It is scarcity, uncertainty, projection, all stacked together. It makes them reveal themselves while you remain untouchable. This is why the strongest men are not those who argue the loudest, but those who master restraint. They do not explain. They do not chase. They let silence do the work, and silence never fails. But make no mistake, silence is not retreat. It is not indifference. It is command. It is you choosing not to feed the system that thrives on your words. It is you refusing to let your voice be twisted into chains. It is you standing still while the storm burns itself out around you. And when the dust settles, you are still there, stronger for having said nothing. This is the weapon women fear, not because it harms them, but because it denies them the leverage of your constant explanations. It forces them into honesty. It strips manipulation of its oxygen. It reminds them that you are not a boy begging to be understood. You are a man who chooses what, when, and if he speaks. And that choice is ultimate sovereignty. So here is your final charge. Learn to wield silence. Learn to make pauses your armor, absence your shield, restraint your sword. Because in a world drowning in noise, silence is the only sound that cannot be ignored. If this breakdown opened your eyes, don't let it end here. Share this with a man who still thinks words will save him. Subscribe to this channel because silence is just the beginning. And turn on notifications because the system never sleeps, and neither should your awareness. Remember this: say nothing, gain everything, and let silence be the weapon that no one can take from you.